the definitive primacy of partial objects and the virtuous gratitude of lack and beauty, in honor of an upcoming course led by Thomas Jockin at the Halkyon Academy, titled Plato on Beauty and Virtue, which begins July 27th, 2024. And this paper was inspired by a conversation I had with Thomas Jockin, an O.G. Rose conversation, 159, and all the ideas are discussed and elaborated on there. I cannot imagine a better teacher on the topic of beauty than Thomas Jockin. I highly suggest signing up for the class today. Thomas Jockin is a good friend, and it is an honor and delight to speak with him. In March 2024, we discussed the nature and quality of gratitude and how there seemed to be a difference between being grateful for something very obvious and apparent, like receiving $100, compared to being grateful for suddenly being able to appreciate and understand Faulkner. Both entail a gratitude, yes, but they also don't seem equivalent. To be grateful for the $100 seems fitting and very linear. While I personally read Faulkner, when I read Faulkner when I was younger, hated it, and then 5 years later I found myself liking it and seeing what Faulkner was doing. And suddenly and all at once I was grateful for the work William Wilson did to help me understand the text, a way of reading I then carried with me to other books and other experiences of art. My horizon of possibility was changed, but I wasn't grateful for the seeds being planted at the time. That took years. And then I felt gratitude. I understood the patience Wilson had to have with me, as I also understood the patience the spirit of Faulkner had to have with me, we could say. And I found myself grateful for forces and processes I didn't realize transpired. Is this second form of gratitude the same as the first or different? Jockin and I discussed. Section 1. Our conversation connected the topics of character and gratitude, and how it is unjust for a person not to feel gratitude for a good done to them. Hence, where there is rightful gratitude, there is character, and this begs a question. Is it more charactered to do an act with a more guaranteed moral outcome, or is it more charactered to do that where it is less guaranteed that the outcome will be moral? To put this another way, is it more charactered for me to give you $100, which you will immediately turn around and buy food that you need? Or is it more character to try to train you to appreciate Faulkner, which there is no guarantee you will ever understand? Is it more character to give you money for food, or to try to show you how to love people and avoid misunderstanding them? There is something about the guarantee of a moral outcome that seems problematic, for then we are at risk of making moral calculations and reducing morality into something transactional. I give you $100, and that means a moral transaction has occurred. And that is certainly a good thing. No one is saying that giving someone money they need is bad, but it also seems different and less risky than teaching you how to engage in life in a manner where you might experience beauty more frequently and thus be more motivated to live, for example, which could positively impact your relationships and the people around you. The second might not seem like I'm teaching you anything, though, and I could easily be accused of being less moral than the person who gives you $100. But this very risk suggests a reason why it might help create more character to engage in action where the moral outcomes are not guaranteed. To do something moral doesn't necessarily mean I develop character, and yet strangely I seem to have the potential to gain more character when the goodness of the outcome of my actions isn't guaranteed. We often say that a person is character who does what is right, but it almost seems more accurate to say that a person is charactered to the degree he or she also does that which risks not being seen as right for the sake of a perhaps higher good. This point, I think, is very important if it is indeed true that, as I have argued elsewhere, a movement from third world nationhood to first world nationhood is a movement from utilitarianism to the values and virtue ethics of Aristotle. Of course, utilitarianism is included, but we can also simply not reduce ethics to such. In utilitarianism and its forms like effective altruism, there is, in my view, a sharp split between character and morality. For in fact, I calculate what increases goodness relative to algorithms, models, and the like. I do everything in my power to remove the individual and subjective involvement, which has a critical role, please note. Helping people out of poverty is critical. My concern is overfitting utilitarianism. However, once people are out of poverty, then what? Well, at that point, what is needed is a transition into something like value ethics, which means the relation between character and morality comes back into focus. But oddly, character seems to develop where a moral outcome isn't guaranteed, suggesting again that saying character and morality are similes is a mistake. Yes, a charactered person does what is moral, but it is not the case that where there is moral action, there is also character. Character requires risk, and it requires being seen as a fool, to risk being seen as a fool. And as a nation becomes a first world nation, the need for character becomes the main concern of ethics, and yet we seem to be overfitting utilitarianism, leading to trouble and pathology. It seems very difficult to transition from utilitarianism to Aristotle after decades of following utilitarianism successfully. It seems irrational and foolish to make the transition. And indeed, history and experience would suggest this, suggesting precisely why the transition itself requires character, which might be precisely when it is so difficult to muster, though, precisely because up to that point it seems charactered to do such where the moral outcome is more guaranteed. And then suddenly there can be a division between charactered and moral. Why should we suspect such a division has occurred? Up to this point, we don't see that in the evidence or history, do we? Indeed, that is precisely why we seem destined to rationally overfit what has worked for a period in history, and perhaps history is such a thing where the consequences of overfitting become vivid and undeniable before we start making the necessary transition. Ideas are not experiences, as discussed in the conflict of mind, and perhaps this suggests why periods of overfitting are necessary before collectively the necessary non-rational choices are made. Hard to say. There is gratitude felt for moral action, but then there is also the gratitude that results from the realization of a charactered act from the position of the realization of a moral outcome that was not guaranteed. Character seems to require bravery and risk, and it seems to be a great risk to do that which costs us and that we believe is good, which ultimately might prove a waste and even lead to our social rejection and alienation. We must be at risk of this if we are to generate character, and there is actually a risk that I could engage in acts which guaranteed moral outcomes to avoid developing character and facing fear, which might be uniquely easy to do precisely because I will easily be seen as having good character for doing what was guaranteed to be moral. In this way, the conflation of moral and character could be uniquely advantageous to self-deception and helping us, quote-unquote, morally avoid facing fears and taking risk. Section 2. All right, if moral and character are not similes, even if related, and if in first world nations we need an emphasis on character and risk, what exactly is the subject and focus of character? When we experience gratitude from a place of character versus just morality, what exactly are we feeling this gratitude in relation to and before? When I come to suddenly appreciate and love Faulkner, what exactly do I appreciate? Obviously Faulkner, but I also come to appreciate that it is possible for reality to disclose itself differently to me than I originally thought, which suggests the FedEx sign, a favorite example in O.G. Rose. It is possible for me to be looking at Faulkner for years and not see it, and suddenly I find myself appreciating both the greater understanding of Faulkner, but also I appreciate the fact that reality can entail an excess and a something more, which I didn't realize was there as I looked at it. I'm suddenly surrounded not by fully present objects, but mysteries, unknowns versus unknowable things, which are things that the more I learn about, the more I find there is more to learn. Faulkner becomes a thing that was always already potentially a journey into depths beyond my impression. The appearance turns out to be the tip of an iceberg, not a subjective illusion or a mere taste. And if Faulkner could be like this, why couldn't other things? Suddenly reality is full of things that could be more than what they seem. The world of objects becomes a world of partial objects. Isn't that terrible? No, because things we fully have access to are things we cease desiring and can stop caring about, as we learn from both Blundell and Lacan. There's a wonderful video by Guy Sinstock titled Getting It, which I think speaks to this. To resume. On the side of what Hegel calls understanding, we naturally seem to experience things as things and there. And paradoxically, this means we naturally experience things in a manner that can kill our desire and motivation for them. Maurice Blondel makes the fascinating point that when we are certain that a doorknob works, for example, we stop paying attention to it and caring about it, which would suggest a philosophical mission to gain certainty is ultimately self-effacing, which brings Heidegger and Leslie Newbigin to mind. Certainty kills desire, and though we say the people we love are the people we know, there is a very real sense in which the people we love are those we don't know. We know them as a person we don't fully know, but that means the person we love, the people we love, have an interiority we never fully access, and so they are in a way partial objects. This is a Lacanian term, but we might associate it with the definite excess brought up in Plato and Socrates, as Thomas Jockin noted. Where there is particularity, there is excess and hence lack, which is a present absence, as Jockin and I have often discussed. Particular things are definitive things, and in their very definitiveness, they gain an excess and partiality, which suggests there is always more to know than realized, but not merely in their potential, but in their actuality. This suggests a critical distinction Jockin and I made in our conversation between potential and excess, which we will elaborate on shortly. First, though, please note that saying things are partial objects is not to say they are necessarily ontologically partial in space, but partial spatially and practically, meaning they are temporally complete, just not to any finite mind. Things are partial as an effect of finitude, but that doesn't mean they are composed of nothingness somehow. What is partial has substance. It's just that this substance exceeds us, to allude to Alex Ebert. It is beyond us and inviting us in. Particular things entail lack and excess, for they are always changing through time and never fully accessible to me in their particularity. Things change through time, and if time-space is more actual than space-time, as argued throughout O.G. Rose, which is to say, if time is fundamental and not merely relative to space, then indeed the actuality of things are manifest through and in time-space, which means actuality is an unfolding phenomenon. Reality does not so much consist of points, but of flows, and what flows always entails an excess, which is its flowing out. If everything in reality is unfolding as time-space, then everything is a partial object, a term like unknown or mystery, which must be more temporal than spatial. A thing could not be partial and yet still there unless a thing was an unfolding that was never its entirety, until the end of its existence, like the last note of a melody, as Jockin noted. And then it would no longer be there. And so there's a real sense in which things are only ever there as things in partiality, ergo excess. What is that which is unfolding and hence entails an excess. And if it doesn't entail an excess and is finished unfolding, it is done and not here. The music is over and gone. Lee Smolin argues in Time Reborn that time is fundamental, not simply relative, and that it is a mistake to treat time as practically an illusion. Smolin deserves wider recognition, and for me, his model of the universe is more of what we would expect after reading Aristotle, Leibniz, Hegel, Bergson, and the like. And the very fact that metaphysics suggests X, that time is fundamental, in of itself can function as a proof that indeed physics should reflect X. Of course, for the last century, it has suggested space-time instead of time-space, with this notion that wisdom entails an experience of a process, that metaphysics is metageometrical, Leibniz, that the future is entirely open and contingent, Hegel. All of this seems disproven and impossible where time is relative and the universe more like a deterministic block. Truth organizes values, and where science suggests W, then the values which follow are Z. Given the stakes of virtue and wisdom that philosophy suggests are in a universe of time-space, X and Y, the evidence for space-time needs to be extraordinary, W and Z, given how much it runs counter to the proof, in the sense of Austin Farrer, of metaphysics and philosophy. But I think we see in Smolin evidence that the case for time-space is strong. Smolin is what we would expect given Aristotle, Leibniz, Hegel, Bergson, Whitehead, so on, and so Smolin could be a piece who connects powerful lines of philosophy in the world today. Perhaps I am taking Smolin too far, and I am no expert on his thinking, field, and work. Still, I believe I understand him enough to claim that he suggests a time-space like what would be more expected given many philosophers and thinkers. Time is relative to suggest wisdom is relative, as is virtue and the like. I'm fine to say time is conditional more than relative, as discussed in Conditionalism by O.G. Rose, for in this we make space for changes and experiences of time between people without suggesting time is an illusion, which by extension could suggest that lack and unveiling are illusionary notions. Partial objects also don't seem possible, but these in some way are needed for desire and drive, and this suggests that a universe of space-time is one which seems destined to render humans without motivation or drive. If this is the science, this is the science. But is it? Thomas Jockin and I also discussed analogy, and there is a long metaphysical history of the analogy of being and the notion that basically all intelligence and experiences of being is analogous. I think so, which in of itself suggests that we are always navigating a relation with definite excesses and partial objects that we cannot fully comprehend in their immediacy and particularity, a point which itself suggests time-space. Analogy occurs when we find ourselves encountering the excess of a partial object and unable to describe it, and so we refer to something absent that can then be more present and hence intelligible. Analogy is a result of encountering a partial object that we want to make intelligible so that we can better relate to it, and we find that doing so requires us to refer to something not here, generality. Analogy is a way to make intelligible something definitive that is too excessive to make intelligible, and if reality is more time-space than space-time, we would expect analogy to be a constant means of gaining intelligibility, as Hofstadter and Sander discuss in Surfaces and Essences. This is for reality is always unfolding, and thus we must always gather. Mr. Jockin spoke of young and uncaused connections of synchronicity, and we might think of analogy as such. So it goes with agency, capital A, and in Jockin describing God as the gatherer, we might think of God as coordinating the dance of reality. Everything is uncausally connected with everything else, which suggests that everything exists and lives in relation to excess and lack. Reality can be thought of intelligible in no other way, and all these uncaused connections are potentially pointless, which is precisely why they can form a situation in which agency works on us and we experience beauty and light of character and as a testament to character. Being is known analogously, as is God for Aquinas, and yet we should make very clear in what way analogy works. Often it is suggested that we deal with a dim version of capital G goodness when we discuss goodness, and so lowercase g goodness is analogous of capital G goodness. And this is not wrong, but language matters, and rather than say goodness is a dim version of capital G goodness, I would rather say capital G goodness entails an excess that is never fully realized by any lowercase g good, an excess that suggests a goodness, capital G, that is only fully presenced in goodness, lowercase, a better term than actualized, I think. Similarly, being entails an excess of being, capital B, that in a sense it participates in, but the potential for capital B being is in being, and so a danger with the word participates in is that it might suggest capital B being exists independent of lowercase b being. Rather, capital B being in the excess of being what being lacks, and so is presently absent in being. So we might say the rock lacks the rock, the sunset lacks the sunset, on, and in this way we might better understand what is meant by Platonic forms. These forms do not exist independent of things. Rather, they are the excess and lack of things which exist with and in relation to things as qualities, we might also say. Analogy gathers many into one, for we gather a partial object together with something missing and ourselves to gain an intelligibility which could draw us in from truth to goodness to beauty. Wisdom is gathering many into one, harmony, as Clayton discusses, and so there is something about wisdom and analogy which are connected, and if all intelligibility entails some analogy, then perhaps all intelligibility entails traces of wisdom, however dim, and if there is something about beauty which gathers many into one, then perhaps all intelligibility entails a kernel of analogy and its conditions of possibility, by which locating we can be drawn into wisdom and from wisdom into beauty. Perhaps this is the human as form when actualized as time-space, where everything to thoughts, to hearts, to hands are found always already partial objects in the image and likeness of beauty, always already moving and dancing and being gathered in the uncaused connection of all things. Time-space is excessive, time-space is actual, everything actual is excessive and perhaps ecstatic. Beauty develops aesthetic. Dance is thanksgiving. Every AA is an AB. A thing is itself to the degree it is excess, which it always lacks or loses, and so self-effaces. Section 3. We have mentioned in passing that potential and excess are not similes, and here we will elaborate on why. First, the problem with an emphasis on potential is that it is far too spatial. It suggests that things could be something else versus in their somethingness entail an excess and hence a lack that is always being participated in, realized, and manifest. Things are never fully exhausted versus could be never fully exhausted. And critically, what is potentially possible for something is that which can be entailed in its excess. Nothing can be a potential that isn't accessible per se. And so that means we cannot treat a potential as independent of things. The craftsman doesn't add a potential to a pile of bronze, but participates in the excess of the bronze relationally to make possible a spear. All ideas start in the senses, so I have to sense bronze before I might imagine making it into a spear. Then I could come up with the idea to make a bronze spear, but this is possible only after the pile of bronze gives itself over to me through the senses. The bronze came to exist in excess of itself relative to me, which it lacks, and in that excess, I am able to come up with the idea of a bronze spear. But this means I don't add the idea of a spear to the bronze, but rather I more so give back the excess and lack of the bronze in form of a spear, which I now see in the bronze, like with Faulkner, thanks to the bronze and thanks to my relation to it, and I feel grateful. I do not come up with the idea for a bronze spear without ever experiencing bronze. Bronze has to be sensed and experienced first. It has to give itself to me, we might say. For me to add potential to the bronze, and the word potential not relate to the excess of the bronze, I would have to come up with the idea independent of my experience of bronze in any way. But once I experience bronze and come up with ideas about it, those ideas are products of a relationship and hence a consequence of an excessive process of lack. I now see in the bronze the potential for a spear, but that is only because the bronze gave itself to me for me to see it as a spear. The potential comes after the excess, which then is a kind of lack. To put this another way, when I relate to the bronze, the object bronze can now, thanks to my relation to it, share its excess with me, which is entailed in itself. Without me, it is basically how it appears. The excess is there, but not shareable. It is not that I add excess to the bronze, but rather that it entails in itself as time-space more than what I am immediately experiencing. And having that excess shared with me, I experience the bronze then as a partial object versus a full object, and so experience the bronze as a thing that can unfold versus be something else. Please note, a critical shift in language that can help us keep focus on the excess versus confuse excess with potential. And once I experience the bronze as unfoldable, which is to say, once the bronze has given itself to me as such, it is then that I can imagine the bronze as unfolding into and as an idea of mine. And so the bronze could unfold into a bronze spear, more than perhaps become a bronze spear. And in seeing that, I am in a sense invited by the bronze to formulate it into a spear. I am invited to become part of its story. I can sense a theme, a command to change. Because the bronze gives itself to me as a thing unfolding in excess, I am invited by relation to see in it a potential spear, an image form and or idea that if I fall in love with, critical language for later, I might find myself attracted and pulled in by the bronze into formulating it into a spear. A partial object is hence experienced by me as partial object. The parentheses goes away, which is for me to be invited by the partial object to steer craft and formulate its unfolding according to my ideas, which I only have thanks to the object. The object gives itself to me as having an excess that I am invited to experience as lacking according to the ideas I have thanks to the object giving itself to me, inspiring. The bronze invites me to fall in love with it as a thing which can be formed by me, and please note that this is indeed how falling in love goes. When I experience a woman as suddenly becoming Michelle and fall in love, a general category of woman becomes a particular Michelle who in the transformation attracts me and invites me to be part of her story and its writing. Now I might prove to be a bad craftsman and be rejected by the bronze in its substance, as I might prove to be a bad man and so be rejected by Michelle. But the point is that in that initial moment of seeing a woman become Michelle, like seeing the bronze become a spear and seeing Faulkner as bad become Faulkner as master, I am attracted in and invited into possibly being part of her life and story. Note here that the word potential might be appropriate, for rather Michelle is in her excess, which invites me is actually realized depends on me and my person. I haven't been invited by the excess and shine of a definitive Michelle, and I want to receive that invitation, but that doesn't mean I can. Even if the reason I fall in love with Michelle versus someone else is because of some certain condition and individuation I have undergone. The word potential seems to rest on the side of my potential to take up the invitation, not on Michelle's being or something. Potential seems to be a word that applies to my capacity to realize an excess, according to the lack I experience in relating to the partial object. But that means excess leads to questions of potential, not that excess and potential are similes. Note that not that I always maintain the language, admittedly. Potential is a word that seems to bring into question my capacity to realize an excess, not my capacity to create one. I can only create out of what I am given. Excess gives me potential. To say potential is excess could be an act of anthropomorphic pride. The craftsman who suddenly sees in bronze the form of a spear because the craftsman fell in love with the bronze is someone who is invited to participate in the unfolding of the bronze, which is to say the craftsman is invited to participate in the bronze's excess. When I experience a general woman, I don't experience an invitation to participate in an excess. I experience a full knowing. Generalities are not partial objects and are experienced more so like objects, which is to say, they do not stand out. Most people I paradoxically experience as entire. I oddly treat strangers as if I know them. To put this another way, generalities and categories have definitions, but particularities are definitive. And in that definitiveness, they entail an excess and lack beyond what I can comprehend. In this way, a stranger or general woman is not someone I experience as unknown, even though that would seem to follow. In fact, it is in the full mystery of a definitive particularity that I experience the unknown of a partial object. And it is precisely in this context that I can feel desire and keep feeling desire following Lacan, if I can keep the phenomenon as a partial object and not say give into a temptation to try to know, possess it fully. To fall in love is for me to make a known woman into an unknown Michelle. I also feel like someone has agency over me, like someone outside my control something outside my control has occurred. Beauty is thus. It is an experience of a supra-agency. It is the experience of a definitive particularity, a partial object with which I am then, in this falling in love, invited to participate in and formulate. Because of its excess, I am invited to dream of potential unfoldings. Potential without excess could prove a self-effacing problem, but potential with excess could prove a romance. Section 4. Metaphysics for Aristotle is about actuality, and Aristotle seems to associate metaphysics as something that only an elder can master. A child can be a prodigy of mathematics, but no child can be a prodigy of metaphysics. Why not? Perhaps because it is only with time that we can experience the unfolding of time-space, by which we can experience and so have conviction in the notion that things are excessive and hence partial objects. Metaphysics is about actuality, which means it is about particularity, which means it is about partial objects and understanding objects as partial, which is odd, mysterious, psychoanalytical, and strange. Metaphysics is to some degree a study of things as things because they excess. It is a realization of AB in AA. It is thinking of partial objects AB and learning to live with them not in a manner that makes us seek a big other, but in a way that trains us to honor a dance. Destiny, something alive outside of us, agent, authority, joy, characters, perhaps gratitude for partial objects, emergence, conditions of possibility, AB. The greatest thanksgiving seems to be of what isn't guaranteed, that we risked our lives for time and time again unfolding. Agents may never dwell with guarantees. Agents dwell with gratitude, the mode by which all things might be good. Anyway, the craftsman falls in love with this bronze, and sees the form of a spear that he then desires to formulate, thanks to the desire created by a partial object. In the same way, I fall in love with a woman that then particularizes her into the partial object of Michelle that I then desire to formulate with. All humans are craftsmen in this sense of relationship. This experience is in the image and likeness of experiencing beauty. Beauty feels like it has agency over us. And so the bronze, the craftsman, falls in love with, feels like it has agency over him, in the same way that Faulkner feels like an agent outside my control. Once I realized there was far more to it than I originally realized. And once I realized Faulkner and bronze can be this way, then I potentially experience all of reality this way. But how do I actually experience falling in love with everything? And so a mystery presents itself, a question that will require the work and cultivation of virtue to approach. My idea of a woman comes from the experience of women, which is why a woman is intelligible to me when I experience her, and it is partially thanks to this intelligibility that it is possible for me to fall in love with her, and for her to then be particularized into a definitive and excessive partial object that is Michelle, which then, if I prove conditioned to be part of this invitation, it is possible for me to be formulated by Michelle as she formulates me, and for us to precisely desire this because we have moved from being objects, secondary substances, to partial objects, primary substances, to one another. We are now beautiful to one another as possible because I knew the truth of what constitutes a woman, and because I believed it was good for me to relate to one. Truth and goodness, like points, then lead to greater dimensionality in the situation of beauty and Michelle. Actuality lacks its excess, we might say, which is to say an object is a partial object, which means it lacks what is in excess to it, which is the rest of the partiality that is a present absence, hence lack, which requires time-space to be actual. The idea forms this matter, which is actual time-space, but the idea is so capable to form the matter because the matter gives itself to the mind. The mind has an idea and form of the matter because it has fallen in love with the matter per se, which is to say the general object of matter has become a particular partial object of bronze lacking spearness that the craftsman desires to realize and be, at the same time, transformed by. Though I will not always stick to the language, libido might be seen as the training wheels for eros. Desire for drive and philosophy and virtue, and much is about us knowing how to fall in love according to eros, not just libido. Drive, not just desire. Gratitude of eros is a situation without a point. It is life. Life is pointless because it is full. To explain, it could perhaps be said that we are almost by grace given a biology by which we can more naturally and hormonally just experience falling in love with someone. Once this occurs, we then know it can occur. And the question arises if we might repeat this experience in different ways. In a sense, it would seem the challenge of philosophy is learning how to keep falling in love without the training wheels of biology. And what we have to fall in love with is bronze and friends and reality and Faulkner. We have to undergo the conditioning so that it might be possible for us to keep falling in love, but not just in the biological sense. We must fall in love with life, but that means we must meet a certain condition. How do we fall in love with bronze or people as friends? I believe this is the work of philosophy, humanities, literature, religion, and the like. Biology can train us to fall in love with a woman and to Michelle from definition to excessive definitiveness, but we must actively train ourselves unnaturally, per se, via philosophy and the like, to see in reality all around us the same definitiveness. This requires work, but this is the work which makes possible experiences of a deeper gratitude. There is no guarantee we will succeed, and so it becomes possible for us to develop courage and character in this undertaking. And as we develop this character, we thus gain the capacities needed to realize the potential given to us by the excess of an object that suddenly and all at once becomes a partial object to us, whether that object be bronze or a friend. To fall in love with something, which I think is basically the phenomenology of beauty, strangely transforms an object into a partial object, which suggests that a primary substance is more partial than a secondary substance. This, I think, is the exact opposite of what we tend to think, for I think we associate a primary substance with something we fully know, while a secondary substance is something we don't know. Strangely, second substances are definitions and categories which seem like they have a lot of potential because we can fill them with so much, but this is because they are vacant. It is particular things which are excessive and thus truly vast. But we conflate vast vacancy with infinite excess. These are not the same. And though we find vacancy and hence potential space to fill in categories, abstractions, and definitions like woman, we find excess and hence invitation to formulate in particularities, concentrations, and definitives like Michelle. We confuse the space and vacancy of a category with the fullness and excess of life. It is when encountering particularity that we can fall in love. And this is the experience of beauty. If we are not capable of experiencing beauty, we are not capable of falling in love. And so there is no love. There is nothing that can pull us, to which we can give ourselves over. To live as a full human is to condition ourselves to prove capable of falling in love. with something and then capable of giving ourselves over to it, to participate in its formulation as it participates in ours. The craftsman who makes bronze into a spear is also formed by the bronze, as I am formed by Michelle. It always works both ways, and so beauty is to be invited into a process of making and being made. What I experience as a lack and excess is the opening and space into which I can enter, so that I also prove lacking and that I lacked what this partial object can now make me. And so I myself prove capable of being in excess of what I was. I experience myself as an unfolding. I experience myself as time-space. I am actual. Metaphysics is about actuality and my alignment with it, which isn't given by appearance and that the brain understands things as if more spatial. But this is how things must be experienced if I am to comprehend them, and I must comprehend them to possibly see them as manifestations of time-space. Section 5. Drivers of the partial object, it is full when it is not complete, incomplete with the I in parentheses. What is not partial is finished. We must be happy and partial to the partial object. In this lack, we can find motivation for life. A lack is a present absence, and in the partial object there is always a part that is absent, which can cultivate our desire to know and seek. We seek to know because we do not know, but in the lover we do not move from ignorance to knowledge, but from knowledge to deeper knowledge, to deeper knowledge, to deeper knowledge. We advance by growing light, not in a switch from darkness to light. Beauty is in the change in light and brightness, not merely in the brighter states. The change is necessary, and for beauty versus mere presence, change changes us, for it means we must be a subject who can handle change and play with it. If there was only states we could choose between, all we would need was preference and taste. It is the change that requires much of us, and it is the child who loves and enjoys change. The child plays with partial objects and is found glad in them. The child does not fall into the temptation to make a partial object a full object. This would be to open Pandora's box, to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Life is about leaving something partial that everything in us says is rational to open and make present entirely. Hence why marriage, as fundamentally an unveiling, can be training to live. It can be rational to lose it all in the name of gaining everything. And that unveiling was in parentheses, the UN was. To resume. Things are themselves when they are partial. Beauty is partial. The partial is unknown and desired. We desire to desire a self-turning wheel, a self-dancing dance. We can desire an agency to pull us. It is found in friendship and dialogue and creation. The meaning of life is to fall under an agency, not a big other. The agency of virtue and character. Choose life. A seeking of that moment when we whisper with a smile, how is this happening? Seemingly the great gift and achievement of art. We tend to associate learning and education with grasping full objects, but this is strangely the exact opposite of the case. Learning is at its best when we honor a partial object and learn to be grateful for its partiality. Beauty motivates us, beauty leads to ethics, beauty saves, but in the most powerful of things are the most fragile a way of miracles. Perhaps the meaning crisis is the mistake of seeking full objects in a reality where we are meant for partial objects. Perhaps, but the point is that learning should lead us toward beauty, which requires partial objects, which requires us to integrate with lack. Wisdom, then, is the art of keeping objects partial so we ever desire them as a testament to the intimacy. A thing is a thing to the degree it has an excess more than a potential. If we do not employ the wisdom and art of keeping things partial, and thus us partial to them, things will be lost. Doesn't that mean points will be lost and we will only have situations? It would seem that way, but points must be negated, sublated into higher geometries of situations. They cannot be effaced into their fullness. Points are points to the degree they have excess and hence lack, which is to say to the point that points are negated, sublated into situations, Leibniz. By definition, this requires us to keep partial objects as partial and not given to temptations for big others or self-effacing completeness. This is for us to integrate with lack. This is for us to become children and absolute knowers. This is for us to be thankful that reality entails an apathetic lack and is fundamentally incomplete. Dance, it does, thus, agency, a life of its own. Lack cannot be guaranteed. It is always beyond it. It requires courage and a non-rational absolute choice, which means it can also help us addressness, equilibria. Virtue entails making things excess and about being grateful for the gift of things as excesses. There are no guarantees where there is excess, for an excess and lack are beyond the range of what can be guaranteed. We set our eyes on the unseen. It is an act of courage. Courage is required for love, and excess and lack. The one who fears is not made perfect in love, in lack. The one who fears cannot give his or herself over to an agency, to a Michelle, to a definitive thing. Fear seeks categories and vacancies and definitions. We do not seek an agent, an interior. A new address seeks agency. It is trained in giving itself over to excess. Pluralism is nothing to fear. We are used to agents, habituated. We celebrate being lost in agents, for we are not lost. We are in love. We form and are formed. Dance. Wisdom is a mastering of the art of creating conditions for uncaused connections to dance, for we know it is wise to be where dance is happening and seeable, and we smile and exclaim, how is this happening? Beauty creates gratitude, or it is doubtful we experience beauty, which is our problem. We do not meet the condition. We have not trained, virtue lacks. On the other hand, a self-effacing move from the definitive to the definition. Null is a move from life to understanding it after it is gone. It is a move from the general and categorical, where full understanding is possible, secondary substance, to the particular, where partial objects can be experienced in time-space, suggesting the need for the art of unveiling, with the UN in parentheses, as we discussed with Dante and Lacan together, and O.G. Rose and Lovecraft. But this is up to us. We must make an absolute choice, non-rational. Space-time as time-space is non-rational, freeing and hard, beyond intelligibility, agency. Partial objects are either experiences of a tragic big other or comic beauty based on our conditioning and in relation to the theme, and relative to the theme, alluding to Andrew and Alex's work. The same metaphysical form of lack makes both possible. God is heaven to those who love God and hell to those who don't. The move from understanding AA to reason AB in Hegel seems to require the falling of love of the craftsman of the bronze, eye of otherness, thus turning the bronze into the partial object of a spear, hence a lack that cultivates desire. Beauty and our taking up in it seems isomorphic with falling in love, and so we might associate the craftsman with having some degree of an experience with beauty. Beauty is intelligible but not instrumental, and yet the experience of beauty for the craftsman can invite him to form an instrument. The distinction between instrumental and instrument could be the distinction on which the fate of much hinges. It is the partial object that has agency. An object is that which we have agency over. The term partial object only makes sense in time-space. Otherwise, there are only objects full in here and in space. Actuality takes time. Actuality is excessive, not potential. Actuality is excessive and then potential with us in relation. Potential outside of relation is an abstraction. Potential without excess is privation. Wisdom keeps potential in excess. There is indeed a sense in which excess entails potential, but as it is a mistake to conflate character and morality, so it goes with excess and potential. We must treat things that relate as distinct, yet the very act of relation makes the distinction difficult to maintain. We play with fire and chemicals. We must. Libido and eros seem like chemicals. The object exists more in the partial object than the partial object exists in the object, oddly. We tend to think the partial is on the way to the full, but really the full is on the way to the partial. The full is found in the secondary substance as definition AA, while the partial is found in the primary substance as definitive AB. To say things are AB is to suggest they are AAB, though, together, for we require fullness in the sense that something must be intelligible to us if we are to approach it, as we need understanding to approach reason, truth to approach goodness, and goodness to approach beauty, but we must never lose sight of the unfolding. The saint entails what it is to be a sinner, which is why the person can be a saint. Likewise, AB entails AA, as reason always entails the possibility of understanding. Beauty can always be boring. That is the miracle. Definition applies to generality, but makes us feel like we know a particular, and so we can lose the particular partial in the definition, which we might associate with the fall of definitional knowledge of good and evil away from the definitive and excessive. Categories and definition are located in the realm of secondary substance, and they are vacant and spacious, not excessive and vibrant. There is a lot of space in a category for us to fit things in, but there are not things inviting us to join them, as there is in the primary. Categories can make space, and seemingly all thought and intelligibility requires categorization, but we are not to stop there. The space is an opening for us to enter a journey of invitation toward and with the primary and the secondary, and AA is good to the degree it proves to be the opening which makes possible the journey into and with the primary and AB. The complete, categorical, and definitional are valid and necessary to the degree they lead to the partial, particular, and definitive, and yet the very necessity of the full in AA suggests we only approach beauty and AB through danger. Walk well. We ultimately are AB versus AA, and yet we require AA to understand reality and find it intelligible, which means we are in a sense cut off from our existential, actual, and original, precisely so that we find and understand it anew, meaningfully, beautifully, as deepening. If we started in AB, we would likely be overwhelmed like a Dante who experienced Beatrice's smile too early. Lovecraftian, with the craftian in parentheses. AB can only be known and lived through unveiling, as discussed throughout O.G. Rose. Also, AB requires A, so we cannot skip understanding. That would be for us to leave out that A in AB that we require in AAB. The brain is structured to naturally cut us off from AB, but in that is actually a grace. There would be no possibility of AB otherwise. Does this suggest the fall was a blessing? Perhaps now. Also, without understanding, definitions in AA, we have nothing to sacrifice and die. We have nothing to transform. So training, meaning, and courage. Reality is movement in time-space, and thus to be actual, we must move as well. And that is what starting in AA makes possible. For then we can move toward AB. And gratitude in its highest form seems to be found when we become grateful for this, for starting in AA so that we might find it possible to move into AB, for starting with a biological falling in love so that we might be familiar with an experience, that we might fight in age, in wisdom with the right, that we might find in age and wisdom with the right conditioning. Only perhaps God has nothing to move aside or develop from or toward. And if we were infinite, there would be no finitude, and if Hegel is right that the infinite needs the finite, there would be nothing. The fact we require a process is a testament to a time-space finitude that makes existence possible at all. Humility realizes AB is always AAB and is grateful for it. Pride might believe we can be AB without any AA at all. Reconstructing A as A discussed the difference between whole hope and whole hope with a W. And the book warned we must not fall into temptation of hoping thanks to an absence of reality. Instead, need to situate our hope in reality itself, which is very difficult, given how hard reality is, and also given that reality shifts and changes. This case must be expanded on. But the point here is that our very capacity to create wholes is also precisely the capacity to experience partial objects and not find them unintelligible or wrong. We experience everything around us as partial, which is why we might ever approach them in mystery and beauty, but that is also why we can whole hope and end up in pathology. There is no way for us to have mystery or beauty without the possibility of whole hope, for whole hope follows as possible from a world that is AB versus AA. Also, would we approach partial objects? This is a question we might associate with the negative pragmatism of Javier Rivera, but we should orbit them, which is to say we respond to lack by circumscribing versus collapse the lack in a centripetal movement, to use Jockin's description. We must not collapse the lack, as we mustn't collapse the good with the beautiful, but instead honor it, which means we can always be tempted by a whole hope, but such is the risk of being toward mystery. And another risk is that everything possibly being related to as a partial object, which is to say everything is related to as possibly beautiful, everything might be experienced as arbitrary, but again, it is precisely this risk that is required for beauty to exist and for it to be meaningful and a testament to courage. Furthermore, if how each thing is experienced as beautiful is particular and conditional, this suggests that the beauty of each thing is not arbitrary, for it is earned. And in the experience of beauty, there is also a self-forgetting. So we do not think much of arbitrariness then. To speculate socioeconomically, if everyone were to so live, what might the network effect of beauty be like? What might manifest in and through a beautiful commons? Virtue, a path to self-forgetfulness, is tied to our capacity to give ourselves over to the partial, which is the actual time-space, which is then thematic, alluding again to Andrew and Alex's work. Virtue is found in gratitude for AB as our situatedness in AA so that our unveiling and formulation into AB might be possible. If there was no maturity that we naturally experienced as AA, there would be no veil. To make possible unveiling, there would be nothing. The material is the time-space that moves, generating the lack that is excessive and unfolding, as finitude generates the infinite for Hegel. The veil of infinitude creates the unveiled infinite, which is the openness of an unset future, gathering us into the situation of unveiling the overall result of us relating to what is not us. 3 parts, Leibniz, love. That is what we have described, what moves us in stars. If we need to keep objects as partial objects, should we never commit to them? Should we never marry, only stay dating? Not at all. An object can only become partial in commitment. It is the exact opposite of what we can often think. Falling in love is hardly even that if it does not lead to a commitment, which is the shared and constant situation in which surprise becomes possible and hence an encounter with the real. That is necessary if a courage and virtue is to be developed by which we might prove conditioned to handle and experience beauty. Falling in love is the phenomenology of beauty that is fundamentally more time-space than space-time. Beauty is temporal, for it is a pulling in. It is in this we see reason to think it is higher than truth and goodness. For I observe that it is good and true more like points that don't have agency over me. But the beauty pulls me in, which feels far more temporal and thus aligned with time-space. Furthermore, falling in love and being in love is to be invited into a process that unfolds and deepens, and in this way it is more aligned with time-space. To prove condition to fall in love is to prove condition to align with the actuality of time-space, which requires doing things that lack any moral guarantee and committing to them. And this is why they can produce character, and with character we can fall into love in cases beyond natural biology, a work of virtue and wisdom. Beauty is an experience of an agency with a life of its own, and to experience a woman as Michelle is to experience a being that has agency beyond my own, that has a life of its own, that I only experience partially and as an excess, and thus something I can desire for a lifetime. So it goes in a dialogos conversation, or in fully experiencing Faulkner, or in really seeing wonder in nature. All of these are experiences of things that have an agency that have agency beyond ours, that have a life of their own that we experience partially, and hence are drawn into desiring. And in that drawing, we are invited to formulate and be formulated like a craftsman. This kind of drawing occurs with the definitive and particular. It is in particularity we can experience agency beyond ours, and something then is alive, and we find ourselves full and pulled in an unfolding of time-space that we don't fully understand, and yet intimately understand and feel joy. And we might say, how is this happening? Not why this is happening. And we say this is how in all in joy, as I discussed with Matthew Allison. And that seems to be everything. The capacity to experience everything is a great how is this happening? And this is an expression of gratitude, is an experience not of points or things with a point, but the experience of a situation of wonder, a situation we have fallen in love in, and so feel an agency compelling us to dance with it. How? And this how is gratitude and virtuous to acknowledge in character, because it was never guaranteed, but there. We risked something outside of us, compelled us, and we followed. We were formed with the were in parentheses, and this is no point. Friendship has no point. Beauty has no point. Philosophy has no point. Virtue has no point, because all of these are situations. Marriage has no point. Marriage is a situation. It cannot be reduced to a point. But it is much higher than a point. It is pointless. It is a way. It is what we fall in love with. It is what we encounter. How is this happening? How can there be so much life in what doesn't have a point? Because life is pointless. Life is a situation. Dance to dance. For more on the class that Thomas Jockin will be teaching, please visit the Halkyon Academy, and please sign up for the class today. And for more by Thomas Jockin, please check out his Medium, his YouTube channel, and the rest of his work, which I highly suggest you sign up for his class on beauty today.